Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to bring to you my good friend. I've known her for quite some time. She is now in the sports broadcast journalist world, a former athlete, a current advocate for women in sports, just an awesome all around person. Welcome to the show, Amanda Smith.
Thank you for having me. I know it's kind of crazy to think about like how long we've known each other.
Yes, yes, we go way back to the AGV basketball days. Shout out to all of you guys who were with us back then. And you are the sister of one of my favorite point guards of all time, none other than Sarah Smith. How's she doing?
She's good. I feel like I'm known as Sarah Smith's sister. So I'm like my claim in life.
Well, then that's flipped because back then she was known as Amanda Smith's sister. So we definitely have to get into that. What I like to do on the show, get right into. I like to cut the conversations in half, Amanda. Like I want to start the conversation with just telling your story because your story has uh, fruit in it, things that we can get better from. So talk to us about going from being an athlete, being a hooper, to life beyond athletics.
I think that's a great question, and it's something that I think is really complex because for me, my entire identity was wrapped up in being a basketball player. So from like as long as I can remember, and how you met me, right? Like Amanda, the basketball player. Um, Obviously, I had some injuries and decided to pursue a different avenue than continuing my athletic career. And so to of think about an identity past Amanda, the basketball player, when you've always had this one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing that. What do I what do I enjoy doing? Like, who am I? I think is a really good question. So for me, finding a way to stay around athletics and to be around something I'm really passionate about, which is sports. Um, Going into media was kind of just an avenue that I decided to pursue.
That's awesome. And I think we see a lot of people that
Mhm.
have that dual goal, right? I want to play basketball as long as I can. And if it doesn't work out, then I want to go into sports media. I think that's a pretty common goal amongst the athletes. So talk to us about that journey. How difficult is that journey to get from playing the game to being involved with it on the media side?
Yeah, I think that like my experience is going to look different than someone else's. That's going to look different than someone else's. So for me, um, I wrap up my playing career. I go to college. I decide I want to major in communication and just get experience. I had done like high school newspaper, and I really enjoyed writing. Um, but I've really always been joined to like connection and stories and getting to know people and why they want to be X, or like why they want to do this, or whatever it is. So I decided to pursue that as a major. And then after school, it's like you're kind of in this little bubble when you're in college and you have opportunity. I graduated from college and it's like radio silence.
Mhm.
um, so it's like, oh my gosh, like I chose to do this for a career. Now what? um, and so I think my journey maybe looks a little different in the sense that I um, was working full time at a restaurant, just kind of going around the country with one of my close friends, and we would he would shoot video for me, and I would just do reporting for nothing, but like for myself, right, to try to get better.
Mhm.
Um, and eventually, I applied for a job in Salt Lake City, Utah, working with an NBA team there, working as a broadcast assistant. So kind of working on the production side, but also getting to, do podcasts and participate in different reporting skills. And I was selected for that position. And I moved to Utah, never having been there, in 2 weeks, with two cats in my car. I didn't know my car was. I don't have that. I have a new car now.
Okay.
But I kind of went there with uh, no plan, except I knew that I was going to work in this field. And from there, kind of just connected with people in the area at the local university, University of Utah. decided to start working with the women's basketball program there on radio. Got connected with some more people, started doing some Pac-12 network games on the television side. And then now I live in Washington State and have been doing stuff with Gonzaga women's basketball, WCC. I also work at an animal shelter. So I think that for me, when I talk about my journey, and I think something, if I could like go back and tell myself, it would be like, I have more than like one interest. I love, you know, advocating for animals. I love working with animals. But I also love sports. And so like not feeling like you have to choose like one thing and like that's your whole identity, right? Because I was just talking about that. Basketball is my whole identity. So then it was like, oh, okay, perfect. I'm not a basketball player anymore. Now I'm Amanda, the sports reporter.
Mhm.
And to me, just having these one titles wasn't fulfilling. Um, so I think as a person, beyond the profession, figuring out what you like, what you don't like, and trying new things. And it's still something I'm pushing myself to do is trying new things and seeing like, hey, is this working? Or maybe is this not something I want to pursue any further?
What I love about it is it's similar, in my opinion. It's similar to trying to be an athlete trying to be a musician, a comedian, an
Yeah.
actress, an actor. These are dream goals. These are the types of goals that some of the cynical people in the world will say. They'll give you the percentages of those who make it in that craft and not. So take us back to that, to young Amanda Smith working in restaurant. How much seed of doubt did you let in? How much of that is real, and what strategy would you give to young people to overcome that seed of doubt?
It's a great question because I think that you're very right in the sense that a lot of people aren't going to understand your dream or goal. Um, and I honestly got to a point where I like wouldn't even tell people that I had like something else I was trying to pursue because you don't want to let that doubt in because it does start to like we're human. You start to be like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Mhm.
I'm continuing to do these things and not immediately seeing results. And I think it's whether you're an athlete trying to get better at something, trying to break into an industry, or you're trying to switch careers, like you're not going to be perfect. Like, it's never going to look perfect. And that's something I've really had to kind of work on because I like to succeed as I'm sure like most people who like to win and have played on a team do, right? But it's not always wins when you're doing something that takes time, and it takes time to develop and gain confidence and be able to say like maybe this is a path that I do want to pursue, or maybe this isn't a job that's going to serve my purpose, and saying no to some stuff. That those decisions take confidence that I think when I was younger I didn't really have. So when you talk about letting doubt in, um, having to explain, I just think it's kind of funny. Like I think back to some, comments or things, and everyone I think sometimes likes to doubt until they see you succeed, and then it's on the other side of like, wow, you're doing amazing.
Mhm.
And for me, it was kind of like reminding myself, like it feels good to be recognized, but you don't need that recognition from other people to
Mhm.
know that you're, following your path.
That's right. That's right. So the Utah Jazz. I mean, that's for me to be able a friend of yours and follow your journey. I never had a seed of doubt, but I certainly was just watching from afar, just like, okay, see how this goes. And then once I saw that you were working in NBA places, you're working in the Pac-12, which is one of the Power Fives. It's like, okay, these are great. So tell me, which one is your preferred experience? What do you like about working with the pro sports versus the college sports?
Ooh, a tough question. It's hard to say that they're comparable.
Mhm.
I think that what's really amazing about having worked in an MBA setting is, getting to watch and cover some of, not just some of the best athletes in the country, some of the best athletes in the world.
Mhm.
Um, and, thinking back on, um, we did like a radio show, and excuse me, we'd be trying to grab content or sound bites for to play on the radio. And so, you have an opportunity to ask, right? As a reporter, you have an opportunity to ask these world-class athletes and coaches questions. And I think that was something that was really intimidating at first to walk into. And it was uncomfortable because, you're like the new person on site.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch these people, on TV. At the end of the day, though, they're doing their job. And so, like, it's your responsibility to do your job. So I just remember some of the first interviews I did or questions I asked, just sitting there, like, being like, okay, you're going to ask questions. You're just going to speak up, use your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that, I would hope to encourage a lot of young women to do too, is not be afraid to speak up and to use your voice, because I will say that in a lot of those settings I was one of few women in those situations. So knowing, like, you got hired for this job, you're here for a reason, and to have confidence in that. On the college side, it's really fun because you get to follow a journey over however long that athlete is there. And then I primarily, in the college realm, have worked in women's sports, and that's been really cool to see, post college, what people do, where they go, if they continue their athletic career. I know some people who have gotten into coaching now. You just get to connect with, incredible people. I think that there's something really special about women's college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So it's hard to say, like, which experience like I enjoy more, but I think that they're both really unique, and I think it's easy to forget, like, oh my gosh, that was really cool, right? Like, yeah, I did that.
Right.
It's really fun.
So I want to stay in that craft a little bit, because I'm just so intrigued by the craft. I don't know if you know this, but I studied communications in college too. I mean, this was my thing. I was like, okay, if I don't play ball, I'm going to go into media. Then I got an internship, and I saw they put makeup on the guys, and I said, all right, I'm out. So I have not. Yeah.
Oh,
But I'm wondering. Okay, so as an athlete, I know that there's some training that goes on from the teams that kind of teaches the athlete how to have media savvy, right? How to respond to the media. And that training ultimately is designed to sort of um, mainstream their answers, right? Get the smooth stuff out. Now, on your end, would you say that there's an unspoken agreement that you ask the type of questions that allow for that to happen? Or are you, like, responsible for digging in and trying to get the athlete to open up and get out of that mainstream answer?
yeah, I think that, for me, relationships are like the biggest thing when it comes to trust. And so if, someone knows that you genuinely have their best interest at heart, and yeah, sometimes, you might have to bring up something uncomfortable, as in, you know, your coach said that you really need to work on your defense. Like, that's not something that someone always wants to hear, right? But, like, that's a reality. And if the stat sheet is showing that, it might be something that you want to touch. But I think the approach of how you go about the situation, um, and you're going to get a more genuine answer from someone if they feel like you're not just always there trying to get something from them. So that's kind of always been my thing when I've worked in these environments, is, just like showing up, being there, and, having people know that you're there to tell their story in the best way possible. And I think it's a huge responsibility when someone trusts you with their words. And so I know that, everyone's different, but for me, like, I don't usually have like a phone recorder or, some sort of like audio device out. Because that stuff where I like start to get a little like more like, "Ugh."
Guarded.
That's just human nature.
Right.
Like, am I saying the right thing? Or what it like? Is it going to be judged? Is it going to be criticized? I think you get a little bit more authentic response sometimes from people when they feel like they can speak openly, and not, they know they've seen you there. You've talked to them before. And sometimes it's not even like talking to them because you're doing a piece. It's just like, hey, how did, you know, shoot around go? How did that feel? Like, and maybe you don't even use it. You're just there to kind of represent. So I think it's a huge responsibility and a privilege to have someone, trust you with their words, and
Yeah.
to write that in a way that they, um, that they would, right? Like you're the ultimately like the voice of the person who trusted you to say this.
Yeah. And you said something intriguing in the invite when we sent you the invite on the show, and you graciously accepted. You put on there that you want to show people how to, or you want to discuss the idea that athletes are human, like, and how to see them as human. So, what advice would you give to us as listeners, those of us who consume sports? We're involved with fantasy. Unfortunately, some of us are gambling on it, but even in a more purity way, we have young people look up to these athletes and everything like that. So how do we do those things but yet still keep them in their proper space, which is that they're just like us?
Yeah, I think that Tara Vanderveer, who is the Stanford women's head basketball coach, she said something when I had spoken with her once, and she talked about, the evolution of coaching and understanding that the athlete, right, the player, that's someone's daughter or friend or sister, and approaching it from a more like human standpoint. And that's always stood out to me of like, yes, like I do these things, but I'm also, a dog mom and a cat mom and that a sister and a wife and all the, I'm a different thing to different people. And I think it's just really important to remember that like your favorite athletes, they, this is their job and they love it, and we get to consume that content and watch, these incredible games and be a small part of them. But at the end of the day, they go home. What do you like to do? Like, I'm so
Mhm.
curious, like I'm just a really curious person, I think, of like, what do people enjoy? What do they like to do beyond their job? Because I think that that's what I was kind of, talking about earlier, is this identity past your profession, and something that um, a lot of us had to look at, especially when COVID shut down the world, of like, oh my gosh, like, what do I like to do besides work?
Yeah.
And really like dive into that. So I think it's something that's really cool, and just really important. And I would encourage young people to look at. Um, and then also, I'm not a parent, but if I think back to like my experience, encouraging, the child, to try new things and to fail, and that's okay.
Hmm. Absolutely. So it wasn't going to take me long to get to your shirt, but your shirt is it's got a message on it. So we're gonna let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So we want to put women's sports on TV. My partner JB is not here. JB, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes back to Lakes.
Yeah.
He's sorry he missed this one, but him and I both are big advocates of women's sports. And that's part of this show and this AGB thing that we're doing, is to try to put that on display. So talk to us a little bit about that. What can be done to get more eyes on women's sports?
I think just having the ability to consume women's sports, because if you think about like the past NCAA championship, for women's basketball, if you think about the Final Four for women's volleyball, whatever it is, the market is there, right? Someone enjoys that sport. Someone enjoys watching swimming, watching rowing, whatever it is. And so the access, I think, is on, the people who are in charge of putting content on television. I think that the responsibility relies heavily on them to know, like, hey, guess what? There is a market. It's people who love sport. Put it on TV, and it will be watched and consumed. And I think that that's just been a continued thing that we're seeing, where, yeah, when you put these games on television, whoa, people watch them. Like, of course people watch them. These are like, I love a good game. Who does, if you're like a fan of sports, do you not enjoy watching competitive like something competitive, So I think that it's just the market is there. If you enjoy it, you're going to seek out how to consume it. So the accessibility needs to be there.
So okay, so we know the Final Four. Let's start with college basketball because we know the Final Four. That one was successful, right? I mean that Final Four for women's basketball was as exciting of a situation as we've had in sports this year.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about that. What were your thoughts on the interaction between LSU and Caitlin Clark and all of that with the you can't see me and all of that. What was your thoughts on that? You think it was fair game? Let's add a little bit of drama to what we're doing, or do you think that it was outside the boundaries of sportsmanship?
I personally don't think it was outside any boundaries. I think that that's what the athletes have said. And at the end of the day, I think it's important to give them an opportunity, right? Like, and listen to what they say and then go with that. So, I know that this was a really competitive tournament, but both LSU, Iowa, they're competitors, and like that, things like that are going to happen in competitive sport in a game. And at the end of the day, if everyone, like the athletes are like, all right, we're moving on from this, then I think that it's just important that like the story follows and you talk about the success of LSU and the success of what they did and how amazing that is instead of, just staying on this one story.
Yeah, and I think I love for you to be the one to speak on this because if I'm not careful, I'll start going off. But like, because you're from this space, right? So okay, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate here for a minute. So I would say that your job requires you to stay on the dramatic piece, right? The dramatic piece is what draws the attention. A lot of people consume the tabloidness of things more than they consume the purity of things. Do you agree
Mhm.
with that?
I do agree with that, but I think that like maybe that's where I have like my boundaries of like not, if that's not where I personally feel that the story lies, then I'm not going to go there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love to hear that you have that level of standard. And so would you say that is easier to do from your position? If you're a writer, can you do that? If where are those spaces where, or can all people in media do that? They're just choosing not to.
That's a really good question. And it's hard to speak for everybody, because I'm not in their space and I'm not in their shoes. But for me, if I was asked to write something or say something or be on something that I didn't agree with, or I didn't feel that I should speak on, um, like sometimes I think it's okay to say, like, no, I'm not doing that. I think a lot of people are doing that more, which is awesome. And kind of sitting in that power. As a young reporter, I think it's a little more intimidating when you're trying to fill a slot time or find the story, or your boss says like, this is what I want. But at the end of the day, for me, like I've always said, like I'm not willing to kind of compromise what I think, or like what I feel, or like if people are saying like this is the story, like the athletes are saying this is the story, then I think we should respect them and listen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the story was two phenomenal basketball teams who had a really, really great game, and actually two phenomenal players at the forefront of that as well, with different skill sets. And you know me, I come from coaching both sides. I coach men, I coach women, and I always consider them athletes. It's all the
Yeah,
same. We're athletes, and
I love like some competitive, like I just like who hasn't, if you've played a game, like you think the fire is in you, um, especially at those kind of stakes.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so ESPN. That's the granddaddy of them all. That if you're in sports journalism, is that, or let me not say that. Is that still like the place that you want to be?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think that when I first started working in this area, right, like that, as you said, that is whoa, ESPN. And I think what I've realized is that something I would still like to do, obviously, like that would be awesome. But there's a million other avenues and ways to be in this business. And I think to put so much pressure on saying, like, if I don't make it to ESPN, then I have failed. Or like no, that's just, you could go work, I love what I do right now. It's amazing. There's incredible people who have been the radio voice of a collegiate basketball team for 25 years, and they love their job, and that's their goal. Um, and I think it's, that's one of the more fascinating things about getting to meet people throughout this business and industry is not everyone has the same goal. And maybe they're looking for more balance in life, or maybe they, reached a certain goal and realized, this actually doesn't, fill my cup fully. I need to do more. I want to do something else. I think that that's, something that is really interesting to think about. So ESPN is obviously ESPN. I know that a lot of places and are like, this is network TV, right? Or network radio. And that's really cool. Incredible people, have those positions. But I also think that there's incredible people who choose to work in a different space as well. And that's their choice.
Yeah.
Which is kind of something to think about, right? How we're talking like, oh yeah, ESPN, that's the grand goal. Well, wow, like there's people who've worked like 30 years doing the announcing for a NBA team. And that's what they would choose to do. And they don't want to go any farther. That fills them. That's really cool.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's like, I'm the athletic director at my alma mater, small Christian college here in the northwest suburbs of Illinois. If a big Division 1 school called me tomorrow, I wouldn't take the job. And people would think that's crazy, but I know what I'm trying to do with my life, and it is not go be a big Division 1 AD. So I think it's probably similar.
Yeah, I think that that's, really good, like reflection too, right? And it's not for anyone else to understand. When I eventually left, my position working at the NBA to focus more on college athletics, people who, maybe I talked to a lot or didn't know me were kind of shocked by the decision of like, oh my gosh, you're leaving the NBA.
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, I am, because I feel like, I have gotten all that I could out of this position, and I need more room to grow. Um, and so I'm stepping away from this. And it's, unless you're kind of in that, right? Like where you're like, if I got that call, I wouldn't take it. Like it's not, I always say it's not always for someone to understand. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Well, I respect the fact that you're still in the business, and so you got to answer this question however you feel comfortable. But I'm going to throw it up there, and you take it. So, how are we doing as a society? How are we doing in your industry with respect to gender, to male, female? Is it more difficult for a female to make it in sports journalism than it is a male? And how are we doing in that? And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that it's harder for a woman to make it in the sports media business. And there are incredible women and men who like lift people up in these positions, and it's necessary to continue to push forward and stop having firsts, right? Like stop having the first woman to call,
Mhm.
the first female GM, like the first. It's important. Um, I think that with that, when people are, criticizing women's sports or criticizing someone for their position or focusing solely on appearance or voice or that's annoying, she seems bossy, all these things, like it's important to stand up in those moments, if you're an advocate for women's athletics, and say like, why do you think, and to question it. And so I think that that's how we, continue to push forward is to have accountability, and to have, people who are willing to call out those that are trying to push things backwards, because it's not going backwards.
Yeah, I love that, and I see it. Obviously, we're going on the gender side. I could see it from a race prism as well, and at the end of the day, I would love to get to the point where it's no longer a conversation. When you're looking at a play by play and then a color commentary team, you're looking at the person who studied play by play. You're looking at the person who brings some special analysis because they played the game, and that's how the team is broken up, not necessarily by any of these other factors. And I think we're moving towards that, but I think we should all be wanting to accelerate that process because that's what's correct. So would you say that's the experience that you're having so far?
Yeah, I would, encourage people to, be a play-by-play seat, not thinking that somewhere had to fill that seat with a woman. That person earned their job and their role, and they're incredibly good. And so, if you could get past that, you would know that. But you're stuck in this one that, like, you're stuck seeing this thing instead of just seeing the person that's great at their job excelling.
Right. A Doris Burke, a Candace Parker, they come to mind. I mean, those are the first two that come to my mind where I would say they're as good as anyone that's doing it.
Mhm.
As anyone that's doing it when it comes to calling a basketball game. And that's just the way it is. So talk to us about calling a game. What's that like? Like I would think like your adrenaline's going through the roof. Like, what's it like to call a live game? How much of it is pre-planned? How much homework goes into it? Give me a behind the scenes on calling a college game, a pro game, wherever you want to
That's so fun. How much of it is pre-planned? Supposed to be everything. How much goes how it's supposed to? Almost nothing.
go. Right.
I'm like, it's just so fun. Like, one of my favorite stories that pushed me like way far out of my comfort zone. Back when I was doing Utah radio, University of Utah women's basketball radio games, there was a piece of equipment or something that was forgotten, and so my play-by-play partner, so I was doing the analysis, color commentary. My play-by-play partner went to run back to the radio studio to get this piece, because no one was available to drive it. Well, there was like an accident or something, and so there's like running traffic. So I'm like looking at my phone, like, oh my gosh, like we're going to, like, where is my partner? We're about to be on the air. He doesn't come for, like, he's texting me like, I'm stuck in traffic, I don't know what to do. Show must go on. So all of a sudden it's like, welcome inside, and then, like, I'm responsible for doing the play-by-play, for the first, however 4 minutes or whatever it took him to come back. But I think, like, what media has taught me is to, like, learn to roll with things.
Mhm.
And I kind of wish that I had more of that when I was playing basketball, to be honest, of like being
Mm.
able to adapt in the moment, um, and be like, oh my gosh, I messed that up. Like, yeah, you messed that up. And you still have another 2 hours of content you gotta fill. Like, you have
Mhm.
to keep going. And so I think that that's been something that's really, um, just helped me be a little bit more relaxed as a person, um, in a position. Uh, There's like a kind of a funny moment recently, a similar story of, I was calling a Whitworth women's basketball game, which is one of the schools in Washington State. And the person I was working with, was like taking a little longer to come back from the break. So they had gone and we're doing something. And they're like, okay, you're on there. I don't have the sheets in front of me like to toss
Mhm.
this in, but you figure it out and you just kind of roll with it. And I think that, like, my favorite thing that someone ever told me is like, no one knows how it was supposed to be.
Mm.
No one
Yeah.
knows how it's supposed to be except for you. And that's why you're being so hard on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And I think that's the thing that I find so compelling about the craft itself is that, you know, yeah, there's lights on you and there's cameras and all of that, but at the end of the day, you have to find a way to connect and be yourself in that process. I think anyone who's putting on a face in that moment, eventually, we can tell. But when
Yeah.
someone's just genuine, like those guys at TNT, that's why they're the that's why they're the best, because you can tell they're just those lights are on, but they're just being themselves. They're cutting up. Van Gundy's like that. I think the best of them are just like that. Just be yourself and see what comes through.
And I know that like that is kind of scary sometimes, like when you can be criticized
Mhm.
being yourself. But I think that there's just always going to be, um, people who don't understand. Like, I just, I'm like, it's just kind of funny because I think about like, if you are criticizing someone online, you probably don't know them well enough to
Mhm.
be criticizing them, because
Mhm.
otherwise text them or call them
Mhm.
and say like, oh, hey, I thought this could have maybe been a little bit better, which is always feedback I'm looking for.
Mhm.
Oh, hey, like great job, but how can we improve? And I think that, whatever job you're in, you should be wanting to succeed and excel and keep getting better, always get better.
I like it. Well, I think that's a great place, Amanda, to go a little deeper. Like let's like really talk. Like you're in the public eye, right? Of sorts, which means criticism comes with the territory. So how much of you accepts that and how much of you goes, no, just because I do this for a living does not mean I should be subject to your random ramblings online.
Yeah. I don't really like engage on social media. Um, I think like so interesting because like you read comments and they can be really hurtful. And for me, like especially when I was doing more like podcasting, some of that was really hurtful. But there was also like people who I know that really like loved it. And so I would always just try to, take if there was anything constructive from like comments, like, oh, hey, like that audio could have been better. Like that's something that I think is constructive. Like, okay, cool. Thank you so much for letting me know. As opposed to like, you sound annoying. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is what I sound like. Um,
That's
and just, I think there's just always going to be something that someone doesn't like is what I've realized. And so being able to have the confidence to say like, okay, I know I did my best. That was my best. And sometimes maybe my best is not 100%. Maybe my best today was the 70% I could give because I have XYZ going on outside. I came in here, I'm doing my best. It's not perfect.
yeah.
Messed up every single word. Can't can't get a sentence together. But I tried. And I think that, you know, it's like being a athlete where like you're not always going to have a perfect game, and like
Mhm.
that is really hard, and like especially as a competitor you don't want to feel like you're like letting someone down or letting yourself down or letting your team down, but in those moments like relying on other people and being able to say like, okay, it's not my day, but you got, like, I know you've got me. And I think that that's what I love so much about, not just team sport but being on like a media team too.
Yeah. And speaking of being on a team, so the future of of sport is, we're not consuming it, Thursday night at 8 o'clock like we used to. We're consuming it whenever we feel like it, from our phones or looking at the highlights or Bleacher Report or whatever like that. So, how do you see yourself in the future of media? Is it, is the podcasting space, is the YouTube space, is that more appealing to you, or is the broadcast space through a channel still home base?
I think it's interesting because I feel like I've worked in all of those spaces. And I think what's really unique now about anyone like looking to get into sports media that helped me, that like mentors have, guided me towards, was making your own content. So, before I had started working with like what I would consider, my first real job in the industry that was like a paid position or somewhere. Um, I had my own YouTube show, and that YouTube show eventually evolved into a podcast. Um, and that was something that, I continued doing, and it gave me a space to grow and connect and to learn about people beyond their jobs, which is what that show was all about.
Mhm.
Was, yes, we talked about, what does your job look like? But it wasn't like, um, what do you do? Like, it was more like, why do you want to do, like, why do
Mhm.
you want to do this? Um, what are you proud of yourself for? Like, I think like these questions and affirmations almost of like, yeah, you should be proud that you did that. Like, so like that podcast was called How She Did It. And it's
Mhm.
always, that will be really special to me. Um, because everyone's story is so different, and I think that that was like one of the coolest things about doing that show is you have people that work in different spaces or have different jobs, or maybe they're still grinding for a job that they want, and the position they have is a position that someone else wants,
Yeah.
um, and it's not something that's like fulfilling them fully, and they want to keep going. And I think when we can share those stories, um, and just be open and authentic and honest, that it's up and down, and some days are better than others. And we all kind of, I think, can relate to having a dream, and you don't just like wake up and are like, oh my gosh, I did it. Like it's
Mhm.
time and work. And I think that when we can just support each other and be honest in those moments, it just feels like more community. And I think that that's really important.
Well, let's go ahead and plug that podcast. I listened to a couple of episodes this weekend. It's still out there. That's what I love about the podcast space. Essentially, you have 48 books right out there. There are many books of you with information that exists forever, and these nice little these great conversations that you had about how did the women in sports make their way up.
Mhm.
So if you guys are interested in hearing more about that, go find it. Still on Apple Podcasts is where I got it. How
Mhm.
She Did It, Locked In with Amanda Smith. So that's great. So I wanted to make a comment about what you were saying about the criticism that kind of slipped my head, but like I'm gonna butcher this comment. So it's definitely a paraphrase, Amanda. But
Okay.
Brene Brown says
Oh yeah,
something
love
about
love.
right. Yeah, me too. Right. And well, she says something about in her research of vulnerability, she found that there are people that come to the arena to criticize, and there are people that are performing in the arena. Right?
Mhm.
I butchered that, but it's something like that. And I'm always a fan of those that are in the arena, those that are willing to get into the arena and put themselves out there and allow other people to criticize, because most of the people who are doing the criticizing aren't willing to step into the arena,
Mhm.
you know. And I just commend you so much for being able to say, I have a dream, I have a goal, I have something I want to do, and I'm going to do it,
Mhm.
you know. And I think that's been really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, any follow up on that?
Yeah, thank you. I think, the cool thing that Brene Brown also, says is like to be vulnerable is to be brave. And I think that that goes in whether it's your job or you're being honest with your team or you're being honest in your relationships. Like vulnerability makes us human. And so I don't think that there's any shame in being human.
Yeah. Well, there's no more vulnerable topic than those lovely pets behind you. So let's talk about let's, let's talk about your love of animals. That is not I don't think that's a side piece of you. Right? That's a big part of who you are, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's something, right, that like um I didn't really explore until like later in my life. These is just two of four. Plus we have a fish, so two of five. But I love animals, and I think that um I had volunteered at different places, and eventually decided that I wanted to like work in a nonprofit space, um and to be able to kind of be a voice for um, you know these ones that can't speak for themselves, and it's really special. And so that's something that I am super passionate about, and I would encourage people that like if you have more than one thing that you're passionate about, that's awesome. I think that a lot of people have different, you see, y- sports broadcasters or athletes or people, they do their job, but they also have other interests, or they have another business, or they have these other things that they're involved or invested in. And so um, I just think it's like something that is really important to me. Obviously, like working in animal welfare. And I would just encourage people to just like get out there and explore what your other interests are besides just what you're doing right now. Because
Yeah.
I think that like as a society, we put pressure to like pick one thing and you are that.
Yeah.
Where
Yes.
like we're complex people and I have like 1,000 things that I like to do. And um, I don't know that I've always kind of like given myself the opportunity to explore those. And so it's been fun getting to realize like new passions and goals and set those goals and achieve them and you keep going. And sometimes maybe you set out to do something and you realize like actually this isn't serving me anymore. That's okay too.
Yeah.
Um, it's easier said than done, right? 'Cause I'm like, am I failing at this? It's like, no, don't do it. Uh,
Right. Right.
so
What
yeah.
one of my goals for this show is to eventually get to a place where we're doing this in segments. So not just the podcast, but like doing it in segments. And one of the segments that we want to do is a segment called "What to Love About." And the
Mhm.
idea behind that segment, Amanda, is to just pick, like literally just throw a dart at dartboard and pick a subculture and explore what it is to love about that subculture. Because
Yeah.
I think if you can bring that to people, like everything to love about, like I was at a quilt show the other day because they rented something, they rented the gym, and it was all these ladies there, and they were so passionate about making quilts. And while I've never made a quilt and I have no passion about making quilt, I immediately felt attracted to their passion
Mhm.
that I could relate to, that this is what they gets them up in the morning. I know what that feels like. And I feel like the more of that we can put on display for people, the more they can understand that we're all the same. Even though you have a different passion, we can connect on the fact that we have passion at all.
Yeah. I think that that's really awesome. And I totally agree with you that like, just because, I don't sew doesn't mean
Mhm.
that the person who like I can't support and be invested in the person, who enjoys sewing down the block and like just hey, how's that going? Yeah.
That's right.
Hey,
That's
it's just like I think comes back to like, you know, supporting each other.
that's right. Okay, so two more questions for you. One is, tell us how can we support you? Where can we find you? I want anyone who's listening to you to be able to go and support you. Should we follow you on social? Should we just listen to you call your games? What can we do?
Yeah, I love getting to connect with people on social media because I went through a phase. I'll give my social media, but I think I went through like a phase where I was only posting like work related content.
Mhm.
And that was a choice that I made, but it didn't really feel authentic to who I am. Because I like sharing, my interests and like what I've been doing this summer. And like things that I'm passionate about beyond working. Um, so it's not just work content, but I only use Instagram, Twitter,
Mhm.
and the handles are the same. It's just underscore. It's Amanda Smith, which is really funny to try to like explain to people sometimes. Where they're like, "What's your like?"
How'd you get that?
Type in Amanda Smith. I'm like, no, it's literally it's Amanda Smith. Like 1,000 of us.
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
Uh,
Uh,
and
Rick
then
Williams is pretty common, but Amanda Smith is a little bit more common, I think.
yeah, right. So yeah, those are my social media channels. And then I usually once like work comes around, I try to share where to get that content, whether it's streaming or like how you can get the link to watch. So
Mhm.
if you follow, you'll get the
There
next
you
step
go.
easily.
There you go. Speaking of what you did this summer, I saw you were back on the court. Those knees have held up, and you still
Oh
got game.
my gosh. So my husband and my sister, so Sarah,
Mhm.
um, we played in Hoop Fest, which is like the biggest 3-on-3 tournament, I think like anywhere, and it's in Spokane, Washington. And so we were like, let's play. Our group chat name, like I think it's group chat. Sarah's always like, it's not called a group chat. Whatever it's called when you have multiple people in a chat,
It's a group chat.
right? Like I think that there's like a new term for it that she constantly reminds me I'm just not cool. That we were Smith sandwich, so our shirts had sandwiches on them because two Smiths and then my husband
Got it.
played So you could have up to 4 on your team, but it was just the 3 of us. And it was kind of funny because the teams we played were like, you only have 3 people. I was like, yeah, you guys are making me nervous because like it was hot. I will say
Yeah.
it was really fun. It was like a great experience. But it kind of reminds me of like why I just like play for fun now. It's I was like, ooh, really would love to win this championship T-shirt, but also not willing to spend the next 6 to 8 months recovering from a severe injury.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Every now and then I would do something stupid, like
mhm.
go downstairs and try to play with these college guys. And I'm always just like, Rick, why did you do this?
No,
My ego can't handle
yeah, no,
it.
I kind of felt like that when like we'll see, we'll see. See, it's like the competitor in me though. That's like I want to play
Mhm.
next year, but like my knees. For maybe someone listening that doesn't know, I've had 5 knee surgeries. They were like swollen.
Mhm.
And I was pretty sore and I'm like, yeah, let's go back. Like, are you okay? I'm like, not really, but like, I'll be fine. So
Well, that's why, but on a serious note, that's why I love sports because I really do believe that growing up playing sports
mm,
prepares you for everything. Like you're ready. Like you've got that competitive nature, you've got that humility, you've got that ability to connect with people. All that comes from all that time playing this beautiful game of basketball. You agree?
yeah, I think that it teaches you so many things. And something that we talk about in our home, in like everyday life or our jobs or whatever it is that I adapted from the University of Washington head women's basketball coaches. She talked about being a kind leader. And so I think that that's just something really important that like anyone listening, whether you're a current student athlete, current athlete, a parent, a coach, is you can be a kind leader. And the way that you approach, different circumstances, whether it's playing pickup in the park or whether it's, a game that you're going to win a championship for, the way that you approach those situations, I think talks to your character, and how you want to be remembered by people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm big on that. I saw that on your social. You literally have that as part of your handle. Like be a
Yeah.
kind leader. Like you're letting everybody. I love it.
Well, I think that sometimes it gets confused, right? Between like, I have to be a leader. So my, what I say is end all be all, or, I don't think that everyone responds the same to different criticisms.
Right.
Maybe for, you could speak to on the coaching side, you have to coach differently to different people, because everyone's personality is different of what they're going to respond to. But if we can do it constructively with kindness and be a kind leader, you get people to buy into what you're saying, into what you're doing. And if you can also reflect on the people around me are maybe struggling, or maybe that player's not picking up on what I'm like, how can I, as the leader, do better?
Mhm.
And asking that question, how can I serve you better? How can I support you so that we can get you to where I need you to be, where we need you to be?
Yeah.
And I think just being willing to have those open, honest conversations and not, um, you know, come at things without constructive um, words, it's just going to make us, more cohesive, whether you're on a team or working in a job or whatever it may be. It makes you feel more supported.
I think the work that needs to be done there is on the word kind, not on the word leader. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
have consensus on the word leader and they feel okay with that. It makes them feel good if you call them that. But kind has a connotation that a lot of people struggle with, right? It's like kindness equals
Equal
weakness
weakness,
equals soft,
100%. And
you
it's
know? Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually similar to what Brene Brown's saying about vulnerability, that it actually takes courage to be vulnerable. It takes that same courage to be kind. And
mhm,
that's what I find. Kind leaders are the most courageous leaders. They're the ones I want to follow because they actually have what it takes to be kind. And those who don't have the capacity for kindness are genuinely pretty weak. They're easily frustrated, they're easily
mhm,
moved, and they're really difficult to follow.
100%. And right, like if you're running a program or you were, the court leader, like if you can approach people with empathy and compassion and kindness and say, like, how can we do this together? Like, I am on your team. I am on your side. Like, I would want to follow someone like that, right? Because I'm like, okay, you have my back. Like, I trust you. And I think that so much of whatever it is in sports comes down to trust, relationships, and character. And if we can accept that, hey, the way that we approach these conversations matters.
Yeah.
Like me, I don't like to get screamed at. Not how I'm respond. Like that's just not how I'm gonna respond. And so if you know that and you can approach that differently to me, oh yeah, like oh, of course, yeah. But like I'm 100% gonna be the person that's getting screamed at that's gonna go cry because that's not gonna like that's how I respond
Right.
to criticism. Whereas someone else, it might be like, fire me up, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I just
Yeah.
think that like if we know people first, then we can do better for each other.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree. I mean, that is a topic in of itself. I think we could talk all day on
Yeah.
leadership in and of itself because I just think it's I mean,
Oh my
obviously there's
God.
lots of books on it, but I think yeah, it's changing, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it used to be. I mean, Bobby Knight could have walked into almost any place in the country in the 80s and got any athlete he wanted. A Bobby Knight style of coaching would have a really hard time drawing athletes today. And that's okay. The only thing I would say, and I'm going to say this to you, just I know we're getting close to the hour, but I just want to say this to you and give you a chance to respond, from a devil's advocate standpoint, because I know you're a little bit younger than I am. The only thing I would say to that is that there's also a part of this that has to go on followership, right?
Mhm.
So the ability for young people to follow is not as strong as it used to be either. So there's more of a demand to say you must lead me in a particular way if I'm going to follow you. Where, when I was coming up, it was more, yes, it would be nice if you talk to me a certain way. However, you are the boss. You know what I mean? And that kind of you are the boss sentiment is dissipating a little bit. What do you think about that?
I think that I see what you're saying, but I also think that that's why you see people leave a team and go to a different team with maybe a style that fits more what they're looking for. You see athletes transferring to different schools that has a coaching style that maybe fits more with um, their play style. I think that I definitely see what you're saying, but I also think that it's kind of a cool kind of thing that we're seeing now where people are choosing to go to different programs that maybe they connect with on a better level than just saying like I have to play this is my goal, this is the only opportunity I have, and going just to play for that team. Whereas like yeah, those questions are important of like okay, I'm gonna be on this team, but like what is that gonna look like?
Yeah.
And if not looking how I need at like what's going to fill me what I need, then maybe I do need to leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there in industry, there's the great migration. In sports, there's the transfer portal, and
Mhm.
both of those things kind of create that situation where, yeah, it puts more pressure on leaders to say, you're going to lose them if you don't show them some kindness or some appreciation for their work. You're going to lose them.
Yeah. And I think that that's just, you have coaches that have stayed in their role for 30 years because they can evolve with coaching. And if you can't evolve with your players, you're either going to lose the player or you're going to lose your job.
It's facts. All right. So we always like to end the conversations with the toughest one of all. So we're all like similar to Brene Brown. We're on a mission to normalize insecurity. We just believe it's just like, hey, I'm tired. I go to sleep. I'm hungry. I eat. And if I get insecure, I do X. Right. So, Amanda Smith, what are your insecurities? And then what's next for you in your career?
Gosh, is it okay? On a daily basis?
Yes, it is because I think like I said, I want to normalize it. I don't think it's a big deal at all. I think we all have them, and it's just about talking about it and making
Mhm.
people feel like we can put it out in the open.
Yeah, I think that um, you know, perception is probably sometimes an insecurity for me where I talk a lot about like making it, but like what is that, like how we kind of talked about earlier, making it looks different to everybody. for you. You love working at the school that you're at. For someone else, they might want to try to move up somewhere else. For me, I love what I'm doing right now. Do I want to, try to evolve in that? Yeah. Someone else might like just enjoy where they are. So I think like the insecurity might be, I guess like perception sometimes. Like, are you doing enough? Or like, what are you doing? And I like have the urge to constantly try to explain myself. So something that I like work on as like I'm still working on is like not always trying to justify like my choices and like my decisions. Because it's not like how I said earlier, it's not for everyone. And if I feel like it's right for me. And then what do I want to what was the other part? Get better at?
Yeah. What's your AGB? What's next for you? What do you want to do? What's your get better?
I think I want to continue in getting better at not being like so critical of myself. We were talking about like, yeah, like sometimes you mess up what you're saying, or sometimes something didn't come out the way you wanted. And it's like, oh my God, I'll think about it forever. And just kind of allowing to grow, because I don't know if you can grow if you don't give yourself grace throughout the process.
Right. Well, I appreciate you so much. This has been everything that I hoped it would be. More an honest conversation, bringing some female empowerment to the show, bringing some stuff outside of the realm of just talking about tournaments and all the things that other things we talk about. It's been really, really fun. So thank you for coming on. We're going to be looking to do some panels in the future. So I'd love for you to come back, be a part of that. And you got to say hello to Mary and Scott and Sarah and everyone on the Smith family. Tell them I love them.
I will. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.